Welcome back to No Effing Idea. I'm David.
And I'm Srini.
This is the podcast where we cut through the noise about AI. No hype, no jargon, just straight talk about what AI really means for organizations trying to transform.
And for anyone new, David spent 25 years in transformation, senior roles at EY, Capgemini, as a partner at Grant Thornton. Now he runs Stanhill.ai, helping mid-sized and specialist firms get the kind of AI strategy and delivery usually reserved for the big players.
And Srini is the technology expert here. He co-founded Intel Stack, a $10 million plus AI and cloud services firm, and before that led £100 million portfolios at Capgemini, TCS, and HPE. He also writes the High Stakes Tech Leader, a newsletter for enterprise technology leaders.
So between us, we've sat on both sides of the AI challenge, strategy and technology. We started this podcast because we kept seeing leaders overwhelmed by AI hype, but struggling to make it deliver real outcomes, David.
So the plan is, each episode we take on one big question, and today we want to look at operationalizing the AI target operating model. And what does that actually look like? So here's the paradox, really, I want to pose from the outset. AI is exploding in personal use. I think there's about 800 million people using ChatGPT and similar tools every week. That's 10% of the global population. Yet we've also seen the reports around enterprise adoption, and the MIT report, which we covered in our last episode, 95% of projects still fail to deliver measurable value.
Very true, very true. Isn't it true that individually, all of the AI feels very magical, but in business, it feels stuck? And I've often wondered why.
So we talked before on this, Srini, and I think some of the wider reasons include lack of business sponsorship, ignoring the people dimension of AI transformation, not doing the necessary training or equipping of staff, not having the right skills and delivery capabilities, and of course, the classic blocker, data. If it's messy, siloed, or inaccessible, no AI initiative will ever scale.
Yeah.
Now, sorry, a big pardon. I guess the point for me is that when you get into the enterprise world, it gets complicated. And when you're just a consumer, it's easy. There's an easy interface. There's no data requirements. There's no process or policy or procedure requirements. There's no regulatory requirements. It just gets complicated in the organizational world. So I think all those different aspects matter. But for today's conversation, I wanted to focus on another reason, in that organizations haven't redesigned themselves to actually run with AI. They've got the ingredients, they've got the data, they've got the tools, they've got the models, but without a target operating model, there's no recipe, no workflow, and no chef to make it work at scale.
Well put, which kind of makes the T.O.M the missing link, isn't it? The system that kind of ties leadership, people, processes, data, delivery all together. So T.O.M is indeed the missing link.
And always was thus. And we've all done our big digital transformation programs, and the target operating model was that critical element that brought everything together. It communicated the vision, but then connected that to the people, the process, the technology that underlay the actual transformation. So I got an analogy, and I touched on it just now in terms of no recipe, no workflow, no chef. I like the idea of using the kitchen as an analogy for AI. And I think, again, there's a shift from the consumer kitchen to the commercial kitchen. But in the commercial kitchen, I think if we start at the board level and start at the top, boards are the head chefs of the commercial kitchen. They don't cook every dish, but they set the standards, the menu, and stop the place burning down. So let's talk about prompts. Do we know all AI in use? So we've talked before about shadow AI and who's doing what where with AI in the organization. Do we understand which use cases are genuinely high risk versus manageable? Who's accountable when things go wrong? And are we ready for the various regulatory and governance requirements as set by the organizational bodies, but also the EU AI Act and DORA, et cetera, et cetera?
True, and you put it well. That's a big difference, isn't it? A domestic kitchen can be forgiving, but really at an enterprise scale, the commercial kitchen, and I've seen some, you need governance, timing, consistency, everything falling together. Otherwise, you have a problem.
Yeah, it's not about micromanagement, is it? It's about setting the guardrails so AI can scale safely.
Very true, very true. So you did lay out a very interesting Tom-related post on LinkedIn, David, and that got me thinking. What is the blueprint? And just to warm up listeners, we're going to do a little rapid fire with David in the hot seat, and that will kind of bring out the T.O.M, target operating model, much more vividly. But it's very important to start with the blueprint. What do you think, David, is the blueprint behind the target operating model that you talked about on LinkedIn?
So for me, this is about laying out how AI is going to be adopted within your organization. So a target operating model is how you see your business operating in the future for everyone to aim for and try to bring together the different aspects. So key parts of that, the strategy or the recipe, the North Star, the gut, what are you trying to achieve? What is the vision of this transformation? And then what are the guiding principles that sit behind it? So whether it's transparency, whether it's augmentation before automation, human in the loop, and the key ethical positions that the organization is taking. So I think that sits at the top of your target operating model. But then coming down, what does that mean for the different business lines, the menu, as it were, the customer propositions, the AI first products? What does it mean for pricing models, etc.? Then the supporting functions. So how does this reflect in finance? How does it reflect in risk, HR, and operations? So be it specific AI principles within those different areas, be it monitoring, sourcing, execution, and the like. Then the people. So you need someone who's managing this whole AI transformation and day-to-day operation. So the chief AI officer is now a role that is becoming much more higher profile, who is operating it over everything else. But also you've got your embedded AI champions, but also then your AI agents themselves. So where actual LLMs are supporting the business as assistants. And then clearly there's the training for everybody. And then the processes. So what is the workflow? What is the automation? What are the checkpoints? And how do you manage this ongoing and continuous development? Now, the next bit is the bit, Srini, I wanted to turn back to you because this is your area of expertise, which is the technology.
True. And, the topping and tailing is important. You topped it up with the business side, the strategy side. You talked about the role that supporting functions will play, the role that the CEO, the board will play. But, the equipment and layout, that's the bit that I wanted to also cover. And that bit is essentially four things. Data, you alluded to it earlier. Data is very important. If you don't have clean labeled ingredients, still using your analogy of the chef and the kitchen, I can smell the food now. That's one. So almost, the clean labeled ingredients is so important for us to get things right. The second thing is, of course, the infrastructure, the kitchen design aspect of it. Are you going cloud first? Are you making sure that you are API ready? Have you looked at the cost dimensions of those? The infra is very, very critical. What brings all these things together is, of course, the toolkit. And the more professional it is, the better it can be. And in the toolkit, I would think of things like LLMs, but more important than the generic LLMs, I would look at the safety of LLMs. How am I orchestrating all these tools with the LLMs, with the inside infra and the applications that are there in the organization? Vector databases, very critical. So what what vendors are you using there? How do you orchestrate all of this? And finally, the fourth bit that I will look at really is the security, the compliance bit. Safety can be hygiene, but it is beyond that. It is how you avoid poisoning the restaurant or, breaching GDPR or those kind of aspects. So, kind of flanking all of those things that you said are these four: data, infra, tools, security, and compliance. I think together they make for, a very tasty dish, I believe.
Yeah. The one bit I wanted to add to this was how you actually manage this continuous improvement of AI, because AI impacts every function, every business line, every role to greater or lesser extent. And I think it's quite a shift in mentality for an organization from a steady state, which is how businesses have been operating for a while, to actually a state of continuous improvement and innovation. And so I think there's a very critical element to this, which is the mechanism that manages that innovation process. And I've worked with a number of organizations building AI innovation labs, which is where you do the experimentation, you do the refinement, and you scale the ideas and make sure that what you're producing is effective and valid before you actually adopt it. And I think that sort of that central control of different AI initiatives is also key.
Yeah, I would agree. And often what we have seen in our work is also that if they haven't thought through all those aspects in terms of building the center of excellence or the innovation lab, as you said, when it comes to the turn of technology choices to be made, there's a lot of to and fro that happens, and which is fine. I mean, you can always iterate between the business side choices and the technology side choices, but it's important to have some baseline of business parameters or criteria defined so that it becomes easy for the technology choices to take ground, find root, as it were, and then go from there. So as I was saying, organizations don't need another pilot. They need a blueprint and an AI-enabled T.O.M that can handle scale, pressure, regulation. Those are the aspects, David, that you speak to. Yeah.
Were you going to give me the rapid fire then?
Indeed.
I'm ready and braced.
Yes, good. The reason for doing the rapid fire really is to really quiz the T.O.M aspect. It can be abstract sometimes, and how do you nail down some of the aspects and some of the rather tricky aspects of the T.O.M aspect, right? T.O.M subject. So my first rapid fire question to you, David, is what's the biggest difference in T.O.M design between an org that is still running AI pilots versus one that's already embedding AI across functions? So a bit of organization that's mature already in terms of relatively mature. Nobody is really mature in that sense. Relatively mature and it's got a few production projects going on already on AI versus one that's still tinkering with pilots. Would the T.O.M design, the execution be different?
Yeah, no, I think it's quite an important shift, isn't it? And certainly I recommend that organizations start with just initial use cases and trying to do something on a small scale and develop their skills. But then there is over time a shift. And for me, I think that big difference is around intent and ownership. So when pilot stage firms treat AI as a project, I think mature firms treat it as infrastructure. And embedded AI, T.O.M, every business unit owns outcomes powered by the AI, and they're not experiments managed by data scientists. So I talked before about that innovation lab. Maybe there comes a point in time when that no longer needs to operate because it's so embedded within the different functions of different business areas. But there's clearly a shift between just doing little projects to actually implementing that operating model we were talking about and actually having that infrastructure that supports it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think one of the aspects that I'd add to your infrastructure point is if you're bringing in tools, technology tools, be they Databricks, Snowflake, or any of the other vendors in this space, the thing to assess really is to see how mature they are in using AI as an infrastructure, as you put it. So you can really stand on the shoulders of their maturity and not reinvent the wheel in that sense. So absolutely nicely said in terms of the difference. The second one is kind of related to this. It's, if you had to pick one, centralized AI governance or business-led, decentralization when it comes to T.O.M. Tricky sometimes. Which one wins? Why? Can we have both coexisting at the same time? How does that work?
I think you're right. I think this relates to that maturity point you just asked, we just spoke about. And I think initially you need to have centralized governance to set the standards, to manage the risk, and to build that reusable toolkit. And whilst AI is still relatively new in an organization, that central control is important. But then I think as an organization's maturity develops, then you can start to decentralize in a responsible fashion. So giving business units the autonomy to deploy within certain guardrails. So I think ultimately you come into more of a federated model. So it's not about just anarchy and go off and play. I think it's more about still having that central control, but devolved opportunity and setting the principles and the underlying control, but getting the devolved parties involved and developing their own things.
Yeah. And I'd say that's right, because the rules can be defined centrally, but the slight variations of the local country or market or, employees, that could be slightly different. So they have their leeway and their kind of freedom to play the way they'd like to play. So I think that's a kind of well-defined format that we have seen. Wonder what's the first thing if an organization comes up with a T.O.M and gets implementing it, and what have you seen break first? If things go wrong in designing the T.O.M or adhering to a T.O.M, sticking with it, what breaks first if you get it wrong, the T.O.M designed wrong? Is it risk, people, processes, something else? What breaks first, and what's the first early warning signal, as it were, that you pick up and then go about correcting it?
I think the first thing you see is the people dimension.
Yeah.
So poor design leaves employees uncertain about where AI fits, who's accountable, and what skills matter. And I think the confusion comes quite quickly, and that in turn will then lead to process breakdown and risk exposure. But it starts with the culture and clarity about who's doing what and why we're doing it and what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah. No, I get that. Let's do a bit of crystal gazing in our fourth question on rapid fire. And this one is tricky, I warn you. In 5 years, do you think T.O.M.s will be about humans managing AI or AI managing humans? Where is that heading? I mean, this is crazy.
There's a lot of speculation in this space, isn't there? And a lot of the conspiracy theorists are busy painting doomsday scenarios. I think for me, it's neither. I think it's a co-management thing. It's humans and AI systems continuously optimizing each other. Managers will oversee performance systems, whereas AI is running the operations, predicts outcomes, and proposes decisions. But humans still set the direction and context. That's my view. That's where I think it's going. Clearly, the AI is getting more sophisticated, can do more things, but ultimately that direction and context and control is critical.
Yeah. I think gradually, probably in a couple of years' time, we will know what are the things inside of organizations, workflows-wise, that agents are very good at, and the level of autonomy would have reached a particular point that we could trust the agents to run with it, in quotation marks. And therefore, that element of autonomy can be granted to them. But I will wait to see how the T.O.M actually looks at that point in time. If you look at several assignments you must have done, and, what's that one T.O.M role that no organization has today? This is a question that I think about a lot. But, what is that role no one has today, but everyone will almost need it in 3 years' time? Is there something missing? Obviously, it's not just simplistic to say, okay, please have a chief AI officer.
I think that's where it's started, isn't it? You start at the top and then it'll evolve. And I think this is a really critical aspect, because in all honesty, AI is going to lead to reduced jobs in those processes where it's applied. Because it's so much more efficient. It's so much more capable than humans. What a team of 10 used to be able to do can be done by 2, with AI sitting behind it. And the thought process is that, but there'll be a whole raft of new jobs that these people will then be able to move into. And just like we never had a social media manager historically until we had social media, then I anticipate there'll be lots of new AI roles. And I think there's going to be a whole raft of different roles. We've talked about prompt engineering before. We've talked about who's the accountable parties. I mean, there's all sorts of technology and business sponsor roles in this. But the one I think that's going to be quite significant is the AI workflow architect. So someone who understands the business processes and how to orchestrate humans, agents, and that automation, because how those all interact and the information and the outcomes flow is going to be the new backbone of digital operations. So I think that's going to be a whole new discipline: AI workflow management, architecture, and the like.
Yeah. I was talking to someone the other day, and they said they're really struggling to recruit people who have technical as well as business, let's say customer relationship kind of skills.
Yeah.
And the role that you just picked up, AI workflow architect, etc., somebody who understands the enterprise workflows, why we have certain workflows, what is the intention behind them, and then therefore what do we redesign that to using AI or with AI. So that role, I think, is very critical. And God, we're going to see a lot of things evolve and change. I had one more last one, really, and you'll be happy to hear that in terms of rapid fire is really, do you see the T.O.M being dependent on the size of the organization? SMEs will have one type of T.O.M, medium size will have maybe more complex T.O.Ms. Of course, enterprises, large enterprises, $1 billion company will have a different kind of T.O.M. And then, of course, we've got some thoughts from Sam Altman and others saying there'll be $1 billion company with just one employee and 1 million agents. I don't know, that sort of thing. So, how is this? Is it size dependent? Well, what's your thought on this particular aspect?
I think historically it has been size dependent. So certainly in my work, a target operating model has been the reserve of larger organizations. It's reflective of professional transformational methodology and the like. But I think that's purely because of the professionalization of the transformational space. I think every organization benefits from it. It's probably more important when you're large because it's more complicated, and therefore that clarity is all the harder. And if you are a small organization, everyone's pretty clear what's going on because they have direct line of sight. So I think it is probably more aligned to the larger organizations, but only if the smaller organizations can see it directly. And if they can't see it directly, then they also should be writing the T.O.M just to give that clarity to everybody to how it all fits together.
Right. No, I agree. And in fact, in some of my experience of working with large banks, the T.O.M design and deployment used to be so dependent on, okay, where do you deliver this work from, right? Where do you situate the people who will actually be part of the T.O.M? And one aspect that used to come up very frequently is offshoring, nearshoring, onshoring even, right? So what's that element going to be? Used to be a big question in T.O.Ms. And in the light of the agentic use, et cetera, the ability for, or the need for organizations while defining T.O.M to think of offshore, onshore probably has come down a little bit in the times that we are in, because if you're going to use AI agents, then whether they're offshore or onshore is really no point about it. And the whole dimension of that aspect, the location aspect, probably is getting short shrift. Any thoughts, David, on that?
I think that's a key component that you want to be including in your T.O.M design, because particularly with that geographic separation, the clarity and visibility and the communication is that much harder. But I think I agree with you that the offshoring element is going to change quite drastically, because historically that was always about trying to find cheaper resources to support the function or the process or whatever it was. And if actually a lot of that can now be delivered by AI agents, then that whole reliance on offshoring, I think, changes fundamentally. I mean, it's going to be fascinating to see what it means for the BPO industry and the like, and what actually happens. But it certainly needs to be clarified. It needs to be very clear who's doing what, and whether that is the HQ team or an agent or an outsourced function. That's exactly what a T.O.M's all about, defining who's doing which bits.
Yeah, very true. And you talked about BPO companies. Those BPO companies that are savvy, I think they are definitely trying to codify the workflow knowledge that they have picked up over the period of time in the past. And those that have been task rabbits, typically doing X when Y is required, those kind of companies are going to struggle. And those that have a good understanding of workflows in the industry verticals, they're definitely going to identify or be able to implement a T.O.M much, much better. Yeah, so I think very interesting times ahead.
Indeed. So I think in closing, I think we've looked at the paradox and how AI thrives for individuals but struggles for enterprises. I think part of that big distinction is obviously the complexity associated with the enterprises. And one of the key drivers of addressing that complexity is the target operating model design, and is therefore all the more important for organizations to be embracing, to give that overarching view of how it's going to work. And then on the back of that, then organizations can scale, learn, and deliver the value.
100%. So, the thing that we're going to dive in next in our episode 4 is something I've been tracking and developing my thinking around with various implementations we are doing, is around the enterprise AI scaffold. So you laid out the top strategy end today, the T.O.M, the target operating model, etc. I want to see how to take that. Let's say an organization's T.O.M has been defined. There are a slew of pilots going on, a slew of production assignments going on. How do you actually bring it down using an actual organized scaffold and the design that kind of connects all the pieces that we talked about today? So I would say that's the one to look out for next time. And so would you have any final comments, David?
Look forward to the enterprise AI scaffold. I will return the favor and give you some hard challenging questions. And look forward to talking all through with you.
Yes, I'm sure you'll be as kind as I've been to you on the rapid fire. Well, I'd just say subscribe, share. If there's one takeaway, AI isn't about collecting tools. That's what we'd like you to take away. It's about building the system that makes them all work together day in, day out. So very, very pleased to be talking to all of you today. Thank you, David.
Great to see you, Srini. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.